Hello and welcome to another exciting one. Today we are going to learn how to create this cool hexagonal animation with geometry nodes inside Blender. So let's go. So first let's put up our Blender and then let's go to General to create our fresh new scene. I'll select this light and then X to delete, right? So what we are going to do is let's come down here and then let's drag this workspace here so that we get some space to work with. We'll come here and then let's change it to geometry node editor, right? So now we have our geometry nodes here. So first let's select this cube and then let's add a new geometry node. So there are several ways of doing that. The first one is by clicking here, or you can come to your modifiers and then you look for your geometry nodes inside your modifier, so here as well. So I'm going to hit on new to create a new geometry nodes. So the way geometry nodes work is you get your group input and then group output, right? So everything every input you add here gets fed into the output. So now we have this group input, which is just this cube, and then it's outputted through here so that we see the cube, right? So now the first thing we need to do is let's create our hexagon. Yes, the 6-sided shape. So let me do shift A to bring up this menu, and then let's search for cylinder, right? So let's bring in our cylinder right here. So now we have a cylinder, then we have a mesh. So this mesh will output a geometry. So now if I connect this mesh to the geometry, you see that our cylinder is being seen here, even though it's a cube here, but then we are adding in a new cylinder and then we are feeding in the cylinder into the new geometry. So we still have our cube here, right? So if I do shift A and then let's say I do join geometry, right, and then I bring this here, I can add this cylinder here, and now we have a cylinder and then a cube. So I can do shift A once again, and then I will do transform geometry, and if I bring it here, I'll be able to transform this to a different place, right? So we have this and then this. So this is just an example to show you don't follow this for now. So let me select everything and then X to delete. So now we have just our cylinder that is being fed into our scene, right? So let's decrease the vertices to 6 since we need a 6-sided hexagon. Okay, so now with this done, let's go to our modifiers properties and then let's apply, right? So now it's been applied and then we have our 6-sided hexagon. Let's hit on G and then let's move it to somewhere here out of position. We are going to use this to create our hexagon later on. So we are going to instance on this shape later on in the tutorial, right? So now let's hit shift A and then we can create anything we want. We can go with a plane, mesh, cube, cylinder. It doesn't really matter. So let's go with a plane, right? With our plane selected, let's hit on new to create our geometry inputs. So we've added in a new geometry node to this plane here, right? So first what we want to do is let's add in a mesh line. So let's connect our mesh line to the geometry, right? So this is our mesh line, but then we want it to lie on the y axis flat, not going in the z axis. So if you look at our offset, the offset is being offsetted 1 meter on the z axis. That's why it's going upwards, but then we want it to lie on the side horizontally. So we change from z to 0 and then we go to our y axis and then we change it to 1, right? So that we have something like this. So now it's going 1 meter on the y axis. Next, what we want to do is so this mesh line has 10 points. Let's put it that way. So it has 10 points. So next, what we want to do is offset it in a very zigzag way. So basically there will be 1 point here and then another point will be here and then another point here. So just like that. So we are going to create a zigzag of some sort, right? So to do that, let's do Shift A, and then let's go to set position, right? Let's put it right here. So now we are setting the position of the points inside this mesh line, right, with this set position. And then yes, so basically we are setting the position of this mesh line with this set position. So for this set position to work, now if I go on the x-axis, I'll be able to move it on the x-axis any amount I want, right? But then it's moving the entire mesh line. Why? Because we have to let this set position know what we want to select, right? So we are going to create a new selection based on the index. So let's type index, and then let's add in our index, right? So the first index is 1. That's why the index is not moved, and then the rest, all of them are moving. So let's do a little bit of math here so that it will move each other point by the position we set in the x-axis. So let's add in Shift A, and let's add in a math node, and let's put it right here. Okay, so let's change the add from add to modulo, right? And then you see everything has resetted again. But then we go, the value of modulo, let's set 2, right? So now you see we have a zigzag going on for us. So what this is doing is it's dividing all the index by 2, right? So the one with a reminder is dividing all the indices by 2, and then it's using the reminder. So the reminders will be either 1 or 0. So if it's 0, it doesn't move, and then if it's 1, it moves. So that's why we have 1 0 1 0 1 0 1 0. So yes, so that's how it's creating this zigzag for us, right? So now since we have our position set, let's instance this shape we created earlier on each of the positions, right? So let's do Shift A, and then we go instance. So we choose instance on point, not instance to point. So instance on point, and then we put it right in the middle. So what are we instancing on the point? That's where we bring this instance. So now with this selected, let's just hold our cube, and then let's drag it into our geometry nodes, right? And then let's drag this mesh into the instance so that we are able to instance our hexagon on point. Now we have a few problems here. One, the spacing in between the hexagon are off. So let's try and fix that. So the first thing we have to do is at the offset, the y-axis, let's offset it exactly by 0.6, right? 0.866, right? So that each other is just overlapping at the tip, right? And then on the set position, this side where we offset it based on this modulo, let's change the offset of x-axis to 1.5, right? So now we have our perfect hexagon. So I can increase the count to whatever amount I want, and then the hexagon will form for us nicely. So now let's find a way to add more instance on the x-axis, basically, right? So to do that, what we are going to do is let's bring our group output back here, and then let's bring our instance back here once again, and then let's add in another instance in the middle. Okay, so let's just select this instance, and then let's do Shift D to create a duplicate, and then let's put this instance right here. Okay, so now we have another instance right here. What are we instancing it on? We are instancing it with a mesh line. So we're just going to create another line, but then on the x-axis. So let's select this mesh line, then let's do Shift D to duplicate the mesh line again, right? So now if we put this instance here, let's put the mesh and then let's put it in the instance, right? So now our instance is created, but then we are not going to move on the y-axis but rather on the x-axis. So we are not going to offset it on the y-axis again, but then rather on the x-axis. So let's select our y-axis, now let's set it to 0, and then on our x-axis let's set it to 3, right? So now we have a bunch of hexagons going on for us. So I can decrease the count as I want, and I can increase the count here as I want, right? So basically that's it. That's how we create our hexagon shape. So now let's move it a step further. Let's see how we can add animation to it. Okay, so let's just try and add in a wave animation to make our composition more interesting. So to continue, let me just set up my so I'm dragging here to create a new workspace, and then I'll hit on this just to frame my camera. So I hit N, go to my view, and then lock camera to view, so that I'll be able to move my camera the way I want. So I'm just trying to position my camera in view, and then now let's see how we can animate this one. Okay, so we are going to want to animate each instance separately, right? So we have to realize instance so that Blender will treat each instance as a separate object. So let's do Shift A, and then let's search for instance, and then let's go realize instance, and then let's put it here. So now Blender will just know that okay, each instance is separately. All right, Blender will treat each instance separately. So now let's see how we can animate each instance. So to do that, let's translate. So we bring another translate here. So let's go translate instance. Okay, and let's put it in the middle. So we are going to use this translate with this translation on the z-axis to animate our instance. So now if I move, you can see this moves as well. Okay, so we are going to animate this translation here. Okay, so now what we need to do is, with this translation, we are going to animate it with a noise texture basically. So let's do Shift A, search for, no, we can use noise texture, we can use wave texture, but then let's start with noise texture. Let's put it right here. Okay, so since this is a vector and then it takes in 3 objects, let's first start with combine. So let's look for combine XYZ here, right? And then we plug in the factor into the z-axis, right? So as you can see now, if I change this to 4D and then I start playing around with the distortion, we get this cool animation going on for us. So we can increase the intensity by adding in a math node. So math, and then we add it in the middle, and then we can do a multiply, right? So now if I move, and then if I increase the value, it gets more intensified, right? So that basically that's it. We can try with a wave texture if we want. So wave, and then just the same thing, let's just plug the factor into value, and then just animate this, and we have a nice wave animation going on, right? So this is fully procedural. You can come back if you want to increase the count for your camera, and come back and then increase the count to as much as you want. Then if you want to increase on the other side too, you can simply just increase it so that we have just what we want, right? And then we can just play with the animation, and then it will keep on animating as like this, right? So we can either play with the wave texture, or we can go with the noise texture. So I can input the value here, and then we can play with the distortion, and then it keeps on animating. So let's say we want to increase the size of our the size of the length of our hexagon. We can just come to the scale, I think this scale, and then we can just increase the scale here to whatever we want. Okay, and then we can play with our distortion for our animation, or we can plug in the wave texture if that's what we want, and then we can still play along with the scale. So that you have this cool animation. So I'm going with the noise texture for this one. Then we're going to increase the multiply so that I have something like this. Right. So now let's bring our timeline and then add in some cool keyframes, and then we add in our materials, and then we finally render. So let's go and change this to timeline. Then how can we let it animate over time? So to do that, we can easily change our end frame to, let's say, 120, so that it's shorter. And then with our distort, let's select on this value, and then we hit on hash frame, and then if we hit play, it's going to be animating based on the keyframe or where the keyframe is in our timeline, right? So as you can see, it's moving very fast. So all we can do is divide this number by, let's say, 4, right? And then let's hit play. So basically you can play around with it until you find something that works for you. So I'll go divide by 10, then I'll hit play. It's still fast. So let me do divide by 20, and then I'll hit play. Yeah, so just play around with this until you find something that works for you. You can play around with the scale, the details, the roughness, and so let me go divide by 15. Yeah, so basically there's it. So next, what we're going to do is let's try and add in some materials. So I'm going to change my render engine to cycles, make sure my device is set to GPU compute, and then I'll hit on my render view to see my render. Okay, so we are basically done with our geometry nodes. You can take some time to organize your nodes and whatever, it's up to you. So next, I'll just change this from my geometry nodes editor to the shader editor, and then first what we are going to need to do is to add in some lights here and there. So let's change this to world. We can use you can use HDRI if that's what you want, but I'm going to go ahead to add in my own lights. So we come back here, and then let's do Shift A, and then let's go with lights, and then let's add in an area light. So I'll bring it up, S to scale it up, and then I'll come to my light properties, then increase the strength to something very high. Okay, then I'll make this my main light, so I'm going to bring it up like this. Okay, so we can add in a couple of lights. Shift D, duplicate, then bring another light probably at the back, then Shift D to duplicate, bring another light here, then let's just shine on this side, and then let's decrease the strength of this light a bit. You can add in a color, it's just up to your visual preference, right? So now what we want to do is just add in a little bit of bevel to our main main cube here. So let's select our cube, and then let's go to modifiers, and then let's look for bevel, right? So let's add in a bevel. Let's just increase the segment to 4, and right click, and then shade auto smooth, so that we have some bevel on our main shapes, as you can see. So now let's change from world to object. Make sure we have this selected, this shape selected, and let's hit on new to create a new material. Okay, so we are going to want to have to create different colors within our material. So to start, we're going to do Shift A, and let's search for object info, right? Then we are going to use this random to generate different materials for our material. So we are going to plug in a color ramp. Let's just search for color ramp, please. So color ramp. Then we are going to plug this random into the factor. Then we are going to plug a color in here, right? So everything here will be assigned a new color. Then everything here will be assigned a new. So the colors will be randomly selected, right? But then in this gradient form, so we can change this from this gradient into constant. So it's either black or white, right? So it's either black or white. So let's just change this into a better color of our choice, right? So let's go with this cool green here, and then let's change this white into another cool color of our choice. Okay, so you can take your time, basically play around with the materials if you want. So we can just do Shift A, and then maybe we can go to join. We can go with mix RGB, so mix shader, and we put in the shader here. Then we can do Shift D, and then we create a new shader, right? So we create a new shader, maybe make it a metallic if that's what we want, or maybe make it a transparent by increasing the transmission to 1, and then we'll drive it with the same color as the factor, right? So some of them are transmissive and then others aren't, right? So just play around until you find something that works for you and it's really cool. So once you are done, you are happy with your render, you can switch over. So let's say we are done. Let's just remove the transmission, and then let's make it metallic and change the color to some kind of a reddish color. Let's say we are done with our angles. We can obviously change our render view into EV, and then let's see how it goes. Okay, so now we have EV as our render view, and then this is our final image. Okay, so if you want to render this, make sure you have ambient occlusion. If you want to render it in EV, make sure you have ambient occlusion checked, and bloom, and then maybe subsurface, and then let's go with so and then subsurface scattering. So basically that's it for now. You can go a step further, and let's add in some depth of field. So let's do Shift A, and then let's add in just a plane axis in the middle. Where is it? So it will be added somewhere here. The plane axis will be added here. So let's move it to the middle here, and then let's go to our camera. So camera, and then we come to our camera properties, depth of field, and then we select our plane, our empty that we just added, right? So we can decrease the f-stop. Let me just change this to cycle so that we can see it even more. So let's go back to our camera, then let's go. So we can, so in our camera we can decrease the f-stop, so that we have very nice depth of field going on for us. I recommend rendering in cycles if that's your thing, but I'm going to go with Eevee just for the sake of this tutorial. So let's go back and then let's go to Eevee, bloom, and then we have depth of field here. Then we can just change it to high just to make it a little bit more, right? So with cycles you can do G and then just bring this in a bit. But once we are done with everything, what we need to do is come to this side, and then you can render them into a PNG sequence if we want. But then for the sake of this video, I'm just going to select this so that I will render it as a video, and then once it's selected, I'll just come to render, and then we go to render animation, and then our final animation will be rendered for us. So this is the final video I had rendered in Eevee. Thank you very much for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe if you haven't, and if you have any design related projects you want us to work on, or you have any information, any inquiries you want, please don't forget to send me a direct email. Thank you very much. See you on the next one. Bye.